I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college and entered into my first relationship with a girl, first girlfriend that I ever had. I was a first generation college student and so was she. And for both of us, college was very important for us to finish, to get our degree. I came from a family where I didn't feel a lot of love, so in this relationship felt loved, and the relationship became very physical, sexual very quickly. Within a few months, she became pregnant, and it was news I wasn't wanting or ready to hear. And so in my mind, the rationale for me was I didn't know how to be a father, didn't want to be a father, didn't want to be a husband, didn't want to get married, wanted to finish my college degree, and didn't think that she should drop out of school to have a child as well. So I, with that, went to her and told her what I was thinking, and she seemed to agree. We both told our moms that she was pregnant. They asked what we were going to do. We told them we were thinking of getting an abortion, and our mothers confirmed that they felt that that was the right thing for us to do based on where we were in life. And even though my girlfriend agreed with what I said, there was a question she asked me every day from that day for the next few weeks until she actually had the abortion. David, do you think that this is the right thing to do? And I would tell her yes, but every time she asked the question, the yes came slower. And finally, the day that she goes to have the abortion, it's during our summer break. We're in different cities. I'm man enough to tell her that she should abort the baby, but I'm not man enough to drive her to go to have an abortion. So her mother's getting ready to take her to the abortion clinic. And before she leaves that morning, she asked me the same question, David, do you think this is the right thing to do? And I hesitated, but I did. I said, yes, I think it's the right thing to do. So her mom drives her. Later that evening, I call her. And as I call to speak to her, she's sobbing uncontrollably. She's unconsolable. There's nothing that I can say to make her feel better. She's trying to describe to me what happened to her, and she is traumatized. And in my mind, I'm thinking that in a few days, a few weeks, she'll be okay. But also in my mind, I'm thinking, here's a young lady that I loved, and I didn't even protect her from what she just went through. And yet in a few months, our relationship was over. And there was the heartbreak and the loss of the relationship. And there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of guilt. Even though I wasn't one who was walking with God, I knew that what we did wasn't to get rid of a blob of tissues, that what we did was we aborted our child, that we were actually complicit in the death of our child. And there became a lot of guilt and shame that I experienced because of that. I became very, very angry. There was a lot of rage that would come out of my life, and it would explode just kind of out of nowhere. I became very depressed, and I didn't know when it was coming on, and I didn't know when I would come out of it. I drank before the abortion, but drinking before the abortion was me having fun. It was me partying, but drinking afterwards was trying to find a way to drown my sorrows and to alleviate my pain. As I mentioned, this young lady was the first person I had ever been with sexually. But after this, I became very promiscuous, and I began to use women in a way to just kind of medicate my pain. And I had this drive to be successful. It was almost as if I had this major fail. And there was this, this motivation that wasn't pure to finish my degree. It was almost as if I had failed miserably and I had to prove that I was a success. So there was this drive to graduate, and I did. I graduated in 4 years. I graduated with honors, and yet everything that I thought my college education would bring me, it didn't. It didn't fix the pain, the hurt. It didn't take away the shame or the guilt. I had this thing that I thought was the ticket to my future, and yet I'm feeling worse. And so I graduated, I get a job, I'm working at the university where I graduate, I get into a relationship with another young lady, and she becomes pregnant. And I'm faced with the same decision that I had when I was 19. And what I realized when I was 19, what I did, it didn't fix anything, it didn't help. It actually brought a lot of pain, it brought a lot of hurt, it brought loss to my life, it brought shame and guilt to me. And so this time I thought I'll do the right thing. And And the young lady says to me, David, I don't know if I can be a mom if I don't know you're going to be with me. And so all of a sudden, there's this thing in me like I have to be with her. I need to be with her because I'm not going to allow what happened to me before to happen again. And so I choose life for the child. I'm with her, but it wasn't because I was all of a sudden pro-life. In some regards, it was me trying to atone for a mistake that I had made a few years ago. And so now I enter into this marriage with this young lady that I barely know. And actually, I feel trapped. I feel like, and the anger that I had and the rage was even more. And I'm depressed. And now I'm still drinking alcohol and drowning my sorrows. And an undergraduate degree didn't give me what I thought it would. So I go back to school to get a master's degree because maybe that'll fix it. And just as before, where I was promiscuous with many women, that didn't change. Now I'm committing adultery on my wife. And this is just kind of the way that I'm living. And my son is born. And it should be one of the greatest days in the world. Having a son, I should be passing out cigars and floating balloons. But instead, I have this numbness in my heart. And it's really hard for me to bond with my son. And my life is spiraling out of control. Finally, till I come to the place where my wife and I end up going through a divorce. And it seems like the bottom is falling out of my life. And along the way, there were some men that I knew who knew the Lord, who knew Jesus, who would talk to me about Jesus. They invited me to come to a men's conference, this conference called Promise Keepers. I heard the good news of Jesus Christ, of him dying on the cross for my sin, of him being raised from the grave to give me a brand new life. And that was a message when I heard it that something perked up in my heart. But yet there was something in me that knew that in order for that to be true, it wasn't kind of, as a kid, I went to church and I smacked Jesus a high five, but I didn't give him my heart. I just kind of said some words with my lips and chose to live my own life. To make that decision was kind of what I saw in my friend. It was surrendering my life to Jesus to let him be Lord, to let him use my life as he saw fit. And at that point, there was still pleasure I derived from sin, even though it was destroying me. So even though I hear this great message of great news of what God had done for me, and I walk out unchanged. But yet I go back to people around me, my wife and my friends, and I tell them things that I'm doing I need to stop because they're hurting me. They're hurting us. And I was sincere in the fact that I wanted to stop. And what I didn't realize is that I didn't have the power to stop. And so finally, my wife and I come to the place where we divorce. And it was walking through that Jesus met me, literally met me one day in my apartment. And in the midst of my brokenness, just kind of humbled myself before God. And for the first time in my life, asked him to forgive me of my sin, asked him to begin to change my life. And that began to put me on a road that I had never thought of before. I knew that I was forgiven of everything that I had done, the abortion, the divorce, the sexual immorality. There were some things that God was miraculously doing in my life as I began to read his word and fellowship with his people. He cleaned my potty mouth. He set me free from being a drunkard. He set me free from sexual immorality. From that day, when I was 26 years of age to this day, where I'm 49, so 23 years later, the only woman that I have had sex with is my wife, who I remarried a few years later. She's the only woman that I've had sex with. And meeting her was meeting a godly woman who knew the Lord. She was in ministry. I'm a man who has met the Lord. In many regards, I've been changed. But even in my relationship with her, I found that there were some things that I couldn't break free from. There was the anger that I talked about before. It was still real. And sadly, woman that I dearly loved, been married to for 19 years with my hands. Early in our marriage, I hurt my wife in my anger. I was still going through these valleys of depression. And I would go through and wouldn't know when I would come out. My wife would feel like she had to walk on eggshells because she wouldn't know what was going on. I was paralyzed when it came to making a big decision. It was so hard for me to do it. I was in ministry, but my motivation was to be a success in ministry. So instead of it being about the glory of God, it was about David. It was about me promoting myself. And my mom died back about 10 years ago, and I found it so hard to grieve her loss. And it didn't matter how much I prayed, didn't matter how much I fasted, didn't matter how many services I went to. It just seemed like I couldn't break free from these things. And then it happened that a few years later, I was sharing my story, and I was always free to share. I would share everything in my story, the abortion, with people. And as I was sharing with a guy, he said, there's a guy who's praying for you. A guy who works for a pregnancy center. He's looking for a man to share his testimony at the pregnancy center, a man who's gone through abortion, but who knows the forgiveness of Christ. Would you be willing to do that? So I went, and in preparation for sharing, I had known that everything I'd done, I had said before, Christ had forgiven me of. But I never really thought about the abortion. I never really sat in what I had done. And as I was preparing to go to speak, the weight of what I had done sat on me in a way like it never had before. And I realized how wicked, how heinous, how evil of an act that I participated in, and being complicit in the death of my firstborn, my first child. And yet at the same time, I think I sensed the grace of God washing over me in ways like I had never known before. So when I spoke that evening, I sensed that the Lord was saying to me, David, this isn't another speaking engagement, but I've ministered grace to you, and I want to use you to minister grace to others. I want to give you a heart for preborn children, you, the one who didn't even protect your own child. I want to give you a heart for men and women who, like yourself in your younger days, find yourself in the midst of an unplanned pregnancy and in a crisis and don't know what to do. And I want to give you my heart for men and women that have been broken by abortion. Little did I know that night there would be a man there who did some anecdotal research on the effects of abortion in men. He asked me afterwards, he gives me his card, we have a call, and he asked me in a conversation, David, have you ever invited Jesus to heal that wound of abortion? When he said that to me, at the time I thought it was kind of ridiculous and a little, because it's like I've walked with the Lord for 15 years. The abortion was 20 years ago. I'm pretty sure Jesus has healed that wound. But I didn't say that to him. I said, you know what? I have never specifically asked Jesus to heal that wound. So he said, could I do two things? Could I give you a book called Fatherhood Aborted? And could I set you up with a male peer counselor at a pregnancy center to go through an abortion recovery Bible study? I said, yes. He sends me the book, and some of the things I couldn't break free for years, didn't know why these things were in my life. It began to connect the dots of some of these things with the abortion that had happened so many years ago. And then I went through this abortion recovery Bible study, and God used it to minister grace and healing to me that I didn't even know from my heart. Fast forward a little bit, and I began to walk in some of that freedom. And yet there were still some things where I had some hangups. And so instead of really walking in the calling that I feel that God had given me to minister to others who had been broken by abortion, I kind of resorted to other ministry that was easier to go to. And in the midst of that, God called me back out of that. And in the midst of that, he connected me with a ministry called SaveOne with Sheila and Jack Harper. And I knew in some regards I needed to find some people that I could run with who had a similar heart. But in another regards, I knew that there was still some deeper healing that God wanted to do through the pain and the hurt that I was dealing with that was affecting areas of my life, my marriage and relationship with my kids. And I went through the SaveOne Men study with Jack Harper, and as God walked with us through that, man, there was deeper levels of healing, like an onion being peeled back, that God was doing, that was just bringing a greater intimacy that I had with the Lord, a greater intimacy with my wife, a greater connectiveness with my kids than I ever experienced before, a greater motivation to do ministry out of the fact that I have been accepted and chosen by God, and I get to do this as an offering presented to him out of a heart of gratitude. And this is what God was doing for me through the ministry of SaveOne. And then not only that, as I walked through that, they provided me with training to help me to be able to minister to other men. Multitudes of men around me who also are dealing with a wound of abortion and the loss of fatherhood that comes from abortion, who don't know where to go, who don't know where to turn, and they're hurting. They provided me with training to be able to come alongside of men, walk with them through their journey, and point them to Jesus, the one who brings healings to those wounds. And then they've also provided a place where as these men walk through it, that they now can be equipped, and they can be influenced, and they can be sent out to reach other men who are broken, other men who need to rise up into the calling that God has on their life, to be husbands who love their wives as Christ loved the church, to be fathers who now raise up their children in the fear and the admonition of the Lord, to be men of God who will serve the church in the way that God has called them to, and to be men who are unashamed to bear witness to others of what Christ has done for them in healing the wounds of their heart, and especially the ones that come from abortion. So I just want to say that God has brought tremendous healing to my heart from something that has brought great pain and has brought ripple effects to not only me, but to even my family. But those ripple effects of pain have been met with the restorative grace of God, who is now building a new legacy, and a part of that building has come from me being connected with the ministry of SaveOne. And so if you are dealing with the pain and the hurt and the shame and the guilt and the loss of abortion, SaveOne is a ministry that God wants to use to walk with you through this. No condemnation, no shame, but pointing you to the one who can bring healing to your hurts and hope for your hopelessness. My name is David Williams, and I am a truth teller.